Thank you very much. I enjoyed that last video because it said thanks to Megamark. Did you see that? I'm the Megamark, okay? Scenarios 2018, designing for new expectations. Intriguingly, in the other room is another talk about work in 2018. I don't know what's so special about 2018, but for Herman Miller, we do this every 6 years. And what intrigues me with this is how the world of knowledge sharing has changed. We first did this 12 years ago. Then it was a really internal exercise where you're trying to see, it was very much informing product and our business. Then 6 years ago we did this, and we did invite clients in, but you had to be very special, big clients to share this information and knowledge in this rather exclusive room in West Michigan. To this, where we are sharing it very openly, and I think that kind of reflects the world of knowledge sharing, how it's changed, that actually we are sharing more and more knowledge. The reality is that the world of work is changing beyond our recognition. And so we as a business and you as workplace providers need to think about that, trying to think about how work will change through to 2018. And to do that, we've used something called scenario planning. I have to tell you, scenario planning is not about predictions. This is not trying to tell you what the world is exactly going to be like in 6 years' time. And if you want some real good fun, Google on YouTube workplace predictions. There are some great old videos from tomorrow's world, the amazing thing called the mobile phone, and that we would all have our own computerized control console from home, which is of course in something the size of this now, but so all that kind of stuff. This is not what that's about. Has anyone ever done scenario planning in the room? So some of you have done it from a business perspective. I can assure you that you have all done it. You just didn't know it was called scenario planning. We do a lot of scenario planning in our private lives. Scenario planning is very much about a series of what-ifs. If this happens, then this will happen. If I take that particular job, it means I can have this particular lifestyle. If my son or daughter goes to this particular university, do you see what I mean? Scenario planning. It's lots of what-ifs. Well, it was developed by a guy, and I'll leave you to read that, called Peter Schwartz of Shell. And he's written about it in this book called The Art of the Long View. And what you do is you look outside for other people to help you. And that's what we did. And what I'm now going to do in 20 minutes is share with you a 4-hour workshop. So I'm very much going to be sharing the process. And if you want to hear more, I do have sort of 1-hour seminars in December and January where I can share with you much more of the content of the findings. But the idea is that you surround yourself with experts, and we sat in a room with these experts, anthropologists, political scientists, creatives, cultural anthropologists, a real mixture of people that share their views of the world from a very different perspective. And the downside of a conference like this is that we are so inward looking. Great to see David here from the HR world, but there's not enough HR people here. There's not enough people from outside of our world because it becomes a circle. So as a business, that's what we do. We go outside of our world and go to people like this. And they share with us lots of information. And then what you start doing is you start developing these scenarios. You start aligning it to our brief, which is basically what will work be like in 2018. And you do notice it's work, not necessarily the workplace, because we are challenging ourselves to say, will there even be a workplace in 2018? So it is about work. Then in the expert workshop, you start exploring the what might be's, the what ifs, and through lots of expert workshops, you come up with scenarios. And in scenario planning, you give them names. But that's not where you stop, because the scenarios are only one part of it. What you do with those scenarios is then you take them and you share them with lots of other experts that are probably more connected to your business. So we went to real estate executives, we went to designers, we went to various organizations, and we had what we call these implication workshops. I can't find the pointer, so you can see the idea is that we have these implication workshops where we start trying to think, well, if this is the scenario, so what? What does that mean? And of course, first of all, our first priority is for us as a business. What does it mean for us, running our own business? What does it mean for our research and development team? And then, what does it mean for you as workplace providers? Then you start thinking about that, and then it's okay talking about it, you've got to start acting on it. So we came up with 3 scenarios, and I don't have the time to share them all with you, but again, as I mentioned, you give them names. And the first one is data sphere, the world of big data that we've already heard some mentioning of. There's something called polarized world, and then a world called new normal. And I just want to concentrate on one of those and tell you a little bit more about what we mean by that. And if you wanted to attend those workshops that I'm doing, they are the 4-hour versions, they're only hour versions. We'll go into these a lot more deeply. But with these scenarios, we then take those scenarios and come up with something called propositions, and we'll go into that in a moment. The reality is, it will be none of these and all of these, if you know what I mean. That's the kind of challenge, and this is why it's not predictions. But the idea is to challenge you to say, if it is this, am I ready for this? Am I planning for this? The one I wanted to look at is the world of new normal. This is a world of continual slow economic growth. Now I know we're all getting excited in the last week or two about some better numbers, but read lots of reports about the stability of the improvement in the recession. There's lots of nervousness around it. The property bubble that we're seeing in London, is that sustainable? How sustainable? And I'm not trying to put a depressing side on the, but we have to face this in reality. But is this slow economic growth the norm? The other thing that new normal is about is suddenly the organizations become less and less trusted. And institutions become less and less trusted. And again, we've seen that with those that have had to struggle through the banking industry. We're now seeing it with the energy industry. Any of you that is in that world know your PR company, your PR division are probably the busiest people at the moment. Is that a world that we're now going to live, distrust in big organizations, where there is a demand for greater and increased transparency? That actually, if you want to stay in business, you've got to be more transparent, because people will choose businesses that are more transparent. But actually, there is a shared values that businesses aren't just about big profit. It's about prosperity in more than just dollars. But suddenly in this new normal, you see much more grassroots organizing. Much more activity happening out there at grassroots. And in this world of new normal, because of that, you see the growth of the contingent worker, the contract worker, the worker, and we've heard a lot of bad publicity in the UK about 0-hour contracts. And in fact, only this week in Office Insight, if you want to look at a great website about the world of Office Insight, is this challenge. Actually, for some people, 0 hours actually works quite well, because actually it gives them flexibility, and more, it's about giving people the control over their own time. That is kind of new normal, and we, as I say, we go into that deeper. Just to let you know, data sphere is just about being connected all the time, and we look at that in more detail. And polarized world is where suddenly China and America unite. to dominate the world in the global economy, and actually don't fight with each other but work with each other. And what scenarios do is they spark conversations. This is not, as I say, not about creating predictions, but it is about the conversations. That's what's more important about this scenario planning. As I mentioned, it's the actions that are after this that matters. So what I mentioned is, once you've got the scenarios, you then put them in the mix, and you think, and throughout those workshops, you come up with propositions, the what might be's, the what you need to be thinking about. And we came up with 8 propositions. Now, the thing about propositions, have you heard the term the future is already here? It's just, I can't remember who said it, but it's just unevenly distributed. The reality of what's going to happen in 6 years' time is a lot of the extension of what's already happening on a small scale already. Your challenge is to find out what's happening now. Is it just a fad or is it a trend? So some of this is actually happening already and will continue to happen more. So these are the 8 propositions, and in a workshop we'd normally choose, get people to choose, but I'm going to focus in on those. Just in case you can't read them, they are informed choice, digitally mediated relationships, swarm focus work, which I'm going to focus on in a moment, interdependence, hackable in kinetic modes, algorithm assisted decision making, beware, ubiquitous software, that's short for, by the way, in case you're wondering what that means, and cultural tectonics. In fact, we've just heard a little bit about cultural tectonics already in the HSBC story. So the idea is to say, if this is a proposition that's going to happen, are you ready for it? And the first one is this idea of swarm-focused worlds. Swarm is something that's fluid and changing, and it's kind of self-selected tribes of people. People coming together with a common purpose, but then moving away again. And I'm going to read this for you. Imagine in 2018 that the workplace is actually an open platform. The sponsor of the work, which could be someone inside your business or outside your business, will post it to a platform that will make known that the work is available. A self-organised group will form and deliver the results. Workers swarm from one group to another. Clusters and swarms have more value. There's a higher risk, but there's a higher gain. Therefore, the impact on corporate culture and branding could be significant. Corporate environments could become more of a hackathon, a more flexible type of space. Organisations will come to rely more on fluid relationships with individuals and groups outside of their corporate boundaries to get work done. And in fact, you might have fewer people actually working for you full time. This is, I don't know if you've heard of the Hollywood model of working. If you think about a Hollywood film, they're producing a film and they pull together all the people that's right for that particular movie. They all come together for a certain amount of time, some working with it all the way along, others just coming in and out. And the idea of that swarm-focused work is very much like the Hollywood model, where people come together as and when they need to, then they move away. If that is the nature of work, what does that mean for workplace provision? What does it mean for management styles? What does it mean for branding and cultural challenges if the world is much more swarm focused? Now, some of you will say, that's how I work already. And that kind of highlights my point, that some of it's happening already. And there are lots of examples of that happening around the world. The other thing that's happening, one of the propositions we have, is something called digitally mediated relationships. Where you go to is the digital world to manage your connections. It gives you much more information and helps you make decisions. It doesn't force you to make decisions, but gives you incredible recommendations, whether it's the right people to connect with for a project you've got, whether it's the right people to connect with socially. Basically, this is where you go to your digital world first. This is a world, by the way, where you no longer go to the traditional news world. You go to your network for news. And some people are doing that already. You go to your YouTube connections or whatever the equivalent. What's scary about 5 years' time in 2018 is there are companies that are going to be massive then that don't even exist today. That's kind of scary if you look at the history of software. So these are organizations. It just doesn't tell you lots of information. It's almost, as you heard in the other room, curated and tailored specifically for you, done via the digital world. So imagine that total workplace design, meeting room design, takes into account this digitally mediated relationships. So more support tools, more a variety of places, more places for people to work together in the real world as well as via technology. And that, is your place going to support that digital, or are you still going to do what lots of people do? And I tell you, it is the majority. You are not in the majority. You know that? Because you're here. You're here and you are already forward thinking. But the majority of people get told, that's where you work, these are the hours that you work, these are the tools you're going to get on with it. It's probably not told in that way, but that's the reality of most people's workplace. Are those businesses going to be able to survive in what is going to become much more a digitally mediated relationship? I'm sorry it's a quick overview, but we need to start thinking about, and this is not about predictions, as I said, it is about saying, if it is like that, where are you? And I want to leave you with this quote. Chance favours the prepared mind. The idea is you to start thinking about things within your business, within your team, within your companies, and start looking outside and saying, are we ready for what the future holds? Even if we're not too sure what that future might be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was great. Okay, we're now going